I'm a large animal vet. 12 years in practice. One county, mostly cattle, some horses, the occasional llama that regrets its life choices. I'm posting from a throwaway because half my clients' kids are on Reddit, and every one of their parents already has opinions about me. I won't say which county. The people here have enough problems without the internet showing up, and you'll see what I mean by problems. Although, that might be the wrong word. It might be the opposite of problems. That's sort of the issue. You need one piece of background for any of this to land, so bear with the lecture. A healthy prey animal is a frightened animal. Fear is not a defect in a cow. Fear is the operating system. We even measure it. There's a concept in stock handling called the flight zone, which is the bubble of space around an animal that you cannot enter without the animal moving off. A range cow that sees a human twice a year might have a flight zone of 100 feet. A dairy cow that gets handled every morning, 5 feet, maybe less. The size of the bubble tells you about her health, her history, her handling, and whether you're about to be killed. First thing my dad taught me, years before he taught me any medicine, read the bubble before you read the animal. This spring, the bubbles in my county started disappearing. I should be careful with words here because I'm going to ask you all for something at the end of this, and it only works if you believe I'm a careful person. The something is simple, and I'll say it now so you can hear the rest of this the right way. I need people who don't live here, who don't know these farms to tell me whether what I'm about to tell is scary. So precisely, I do not mean the cattle went tame. I do not mean docile or sick or depressed. Each of those has a look, and I know the looks. I mean the fear went out of them the same way the heat goes out of a body. Some things about me so you know who's talking. My mornings start at the gas and go on Route 12 at 5:40. Large black coffee, $1.89. People who say gas station coffee is bad have never needed to be awake at 4 in the morning for a reason that mattered, and I will die on this hill. Gus rides shotgun. Gus is my cattle dog, a purebred blue heeler, and before anybody starts, yes, I've seen his paperwork, and no, I don't care what the paperwork says, or what Danny at the farm supply says either. Purebred. Moving on. The practice was my dad's for 44 years, and it's been mine for 6, except legally it's still half his, because the transfer paperwork has been sitting on his sideboard under the fruit bowl for 2 years, and he keeps not signing it. I owe $180,000 for the education that lets me lose money doing this. I'm not complaining, or I am, but only to you people. Around here, I'm Dr. C, and Dr. C is fine. 2 useful things my dad gave me besides the dead. One is the clap test. When you've got a downer cow and you need to know how much animal is still in there, you clap once, hard, behind her head. The ears should swivel. If the ears don't move, whatever you're kneeling next to has mostly left the building, and you should stop kneeling there. 2 is the habit of wearing a heart rate monitor on calls. He did it with a chest strap and graph paper because he wanted proof of which farms were going to kill him. Mine's a watch. It locks everything automatically, and I check it like he checked his mirrors. In March, a mare I'd vaccinated a dozen times cow-kicked at my skull. No warning I caught, and I have the graph from that day, and the graph says 143. And I remember the whole thing as one long event. Her haunch dropping and the hoof coming through the space where my head had just been, and me down in the mud with the syringe gone and my ears ringing and my hands not working and no air in me and every part of my body yelling before I'd had a single conscious thought about what had happened. That's a startle response, the fastest circuit we have. And I'm a vet, not a neurologist, so weigh my wiring diagram accordingly. Save that number, 143. Because it matters later. One more thing. Gus barks at exactly 2 things in this world. thunder, and tree lines. Any working dog person will tell you their dog has rules. Those are his, and they have held for 9 years. The first call was the Hollis place, March 30th, freezing rain. Wade Collis is 79 and has run cattle on that ground for 60 years. And on the phone, he said a sentence I'd never once heard from him.
Something's wrong with the herd, and I don't know what it is.
Wade always knows what it is. Usually he's right too, which is annoying in a client. 60 hits of commercial Angus stood bunched at the north fence in the sleet, tight against the timber, every nose pointed into the trees. Not grazing, not milling, rain off their backs like they were furniture. I walked up expecting the bubble. 60 animals should shift when a stranger steps in, roll an eye, and give that first ripple a herd makes while it decides about you. I walked all the way up to an 1,100-pound bred heifer, and she didn't take a step. I put my hand flat on her face. Nothing moved. I laid my thumb on her eyelid. Please understand that touching a strange cow's eye is a good way to learn what your own skull sounds like from the inside, and she let me hold it there. Her heart was slow and even, warm, breathing, present, nobody home in the part that objects. I stood in the rain and wrote possible mineral deficiency in my notes, which is the clinical way of writing this hurt is off. Wade told me the rule then, hands in his pockets, not looking at me. His grandfather's rule, older than the house. If the herd bunches at the timber after dark, you leave them be until sunup. No lantern, no dog. You don't go out to them. He recited it the way you recite a fire drill, embarrassed and word perfect at the same time. I asked what happens if you go out. He said nobody in his family had ever gone out, and that was the point of a rule. I pulled blood from 6 head and boxed the tubes for the state lab. Walking back to the truck, I could see Gus standing on the seat with his hackles up, fixed on the timber. He gave it one bark through the glass. Then he lay down and stayed quiet the whole drive home, and you can file that under things that don't happen. Over the next 10 days, it was 4 more farms, and here's where I should walk you through the workup because I know how this sounds, and I know some of you are already typing carbon monoxide with one thumb. The Vasquez place runs 200 ewes. Sheep scatter. Scattering is the entire personality of a sheep. I stepped over a ewe lying in the lane of my way in, and she kept chewing. Lambing was on, and I spent 40 minutes with my arm inside a ewe, sorting out a hung lamb, while 8 others stood around me in a loose ring. And it wasn't until I was washing up that the ring part landed on me. Sheep don't gather around a predator with blood on it. They were arranged like they were waiting for something to start. Then, a farrowing sow at the Kowalczyk sisters' place. A sow with piglets will scream loud enough to void a lease if you handle her litter, and she'll also genuinely try to kill you, which I respect. This one lay on her side, while I lifted piglets out one at a time and weighed them, and she followed me with one eye the whole time and never made a sound. Quietest farrowing barn I've ever stood in. I don't have a comparison for it, and I'm not going to invent one. The bloods came back that week. Cortisol flat, not low, flat, like the assay had been run on water. The lab flagged their own machine, reran the panel twice at their cost, apologized for the delay, and sent me the same flat line 3 times. The tech I talked to had a theory about a bat reagent lot. I asked if a bat reagent lot could follow 6 animals from 4 farms. She got quiet and then asked in a different voice what these cattle were acting like. I said calm. She said, huh. And that was the whole conversation. And I think about her sometimes because that, huh, was the most honest professional opinion anyone gave me all spring. I did the rest of it by the book. If you want the list, toxoplasmosis, because toxo genuinely strips the fear of cats out of rodents. It's the one famous case of a parasite editing fear. So I pulled titers. Negative across the board. Let and general tox screen on feed and water at 2 farms. Clean. $340 of my own money because you can't bill a patient for your own bad feeling. Rabies crossed my mind for about a day. Behavior change is rabies until proven otherwise. But rabies has a direction to it. Agitation or paralysis, and it kills. These animals ate, gained, bred, and thrived. Prion disease, wrong presentation entirely. No ataxia, no wasting. And I felt stupid even running the numbers. I called the state diagnostic lab, described everything, and a very patient man suggested a nutrition consult. The extension office said they had passed it along, which is what they say. I called the nearest large animal vet 3 hours south, who is booked through calving into deep summer, and she looked at the photos I sent and said,
Ren, they look great. What am I looking at?
And I said, that's the problem. They look great. I also bought an air horn, $60, marine grade, the kind that leaves your ears ringing. A normal herd should bolt off the fence when you crack one of those. It's not subtle, it's a wall of sound. At the Hollis place, I stood 30 feet off the herd and let it rip. 60 hits came up and turned to me, unhurried like I'd called a meeting, ears oriented fine, hearings intact. They held me in their eyes for a second or two, decided I was not information, and turned back to the timber. I stood there with the horn in my hand, feeling like a substitute teacher. I told Danny about half of it, leaning on his counter at the farm supply while he rang up the horn actually. Danny's run that store since his dad's niece gave out, and we have one of those 2-year-long almost conversations going that everyone in town has opinions about, mostly his mother. He laughed at the sheep thing, then he stopped laughing in a way I noticed, and said the deer on Route 12 have started standing in his high beams. Not the frozen thing deer do, he said. They don't bolt at all. He has to ease around them on the shoulder. Last Tuesday, one was still standing in the same spot when he came back the other way an hour later. Didn't even turn its head, he said. And then he said the thing I keep coming back to. It's nice, honestly. You can tell it's wrong, but it's nice. Sunday dinner at my dad's is pot roast, always, which he cooks fine and salts like a man who quit smoking. I told him all of it over that table. The flight zones, the flat panels, the titers, the air horn. My dad has an opinion about every single thing I do with his old practice. It's his entire retirement, arguing with me about vaccine schedules from a recliner. He didn't laugh and he didn't argue. He put his fork down and looked at the window for a while, at the dark coming down over his neighbor's field, and then he asked me one question. Are they sleeping? I said I didn't know. He nodded, picked his fork back up, and talked about the ball game like a man reading from a card. The transfer paperwork stayed on the sideboard under the fruit bowl where it has lived for 2 years. He was the last person I told, if you don't count all of you. Understand the math on that. A county vet who talks like this is a county vet whose clients start hauling their stock 3 hours south, and I am 1 bad quarter from the loans winning anyway. I stopped telling people things. It wasn't hard. Nobody was asking. Here's why his question matters. Cattle doze standing up, but for real sleep, the deep kind, REM, they have to lie down. Any stockman knows the sight of a herd bedded down at midnight. It's one of the good sights. It means things are right. I went back through 6 weeks of my own call photos that night with a beer I didn't finish. 14 farms in the pictures. After dark, in every photo where the affected animals were visible, every single one of them was standing. So I went and answered his question properly. April 19th, I parked at the Hollis North pasture at midnight with a thermos, my notebook and a thermal monocular I borrowed from Danny, who uses it for coyotes. Gus took the passenger seat. What follows is transcribed from my notes, and I'm giving it to you as I wrote it, because how I wrote it is part of what I'm asking you people to evaluate. 12:40 a.m. 60 hit at the north wire, pressed up along the timber side. No animal grazing, all standing, hits to the trees. 1:15 a.m. No animal has bedded down, nobody is chewing cud. Ambient 38 degrees, and the truck windows are fogging from the dock. 1:50 a.m. The herd moved its hits together. One motion, 60 skulls, tracking left to right along the tree line over about 40 seconds. Smooth, coordinated, like a crowd following a slow tennis ball. I glassed the timber on thermal the whole time. There is nothing warm in those trees. 60 animals tracked it anyway. 2:20 a.m. Same event, right to left. Slower this time, and I timed it. 70 seconds, fence to corner. Thermal shows cold trees and one very warm rabbit who did not care about any of this. I made myself write down, whatever they are tracking either has no heat or the scope can't hold it. 3:05 a.m. Gus came up off the seat barking at the timber, full alarm, the real bark, and it cut out in the middle. Not a taper, mid-bark, like a cord pulled out of a wall. He sat back down, put his chin on the dash, eyes on the trees, tail flat. And that was the last time Gus ever barked at a tree line. I drove home with the heater on high and couldn't get warm. The watch backs me up. My body did a real thing there in the truck, shivering, heart up around 110 for 20 minutes. Put that on the record too. It's the last entry like it I have. May came in and the thing that had been out on the farms moved into my own house, quietly, the way a smell gets into upholstery. Gus quit flinching at thunder the first week. We had a storm come through hard enough to rattle the gutters, the kind that used to put him flat against my legs. Panting, and instead, he slept in front of the door, nose to the gap under it. He's there every night now. I keep writing sentences like that and deleting them because of how they sound, and then putting them back because they are true, and you're getting the version where I stopped deleting. Danny's sister keeps barn cats, 5 of them, mean as bolt cutters, no 2 of which can share a hayloft without a war. She sent me a photo in mid-May because she thought it was funny. 5 cats sitting in her hay meadow at dusk, spaced out even as fence posts, every face aimed at the timber on the county line. She'd watch them hold that arrangement for an hour. Cats don't do anything in groups. I did not find the photo funny, and I've looked at it maybe 40 times, filed under things cats don't do. The deer, Danny's deer, I've eased around them myself now, twice on Route 12 at night. They stand on the shoulder while the truck goes by close enough to touch, and their heads never move. I used to keep a hand on the horn along that stretch. I don't bother anymore, and I couldn't defend that to you if you asked. Middle of May, I dropped the tailgate on my left hand. Heavy steel gate, full drop. My fault, wet glove. The bang was enormous and the pain arrived on schedule. But the jolt didn't. You know the jolt, the whole body one that fires before the pain does. The one that is faster than you. The flinch that yanks your hand before you've noticed anything went wrong. It just wasn't there. I stood in the yard holding my hand and thinking, with a clarity I can only call administrative. Second and third metacarpal, probably nothing broken. Eyes tonight, splint the glove tomorrow. My watch locked the minute. Heart rate went from 64 to 71. 7 beats. The mare in March was worth 80. Off was the word I'd been using since the rain at Hollis's. Somewhere in that yard, it got worse than off, and I don't have the next word. They didn't train us one. I did the responsible things, since I know you're going to ask. I booked a physical with the GP in town, my first in 4 years. Blood work unremarkable, thyroid fine, Resting heart rate, 52. She said athlete's heart and asked if I was running these days. And I said no. And she said, lucky you then. And I got a pamphlet about rural provider burnout with a photo of a woman drinking tea on it. I read the pamphlet cover to cover because burnout was the best theory anyone had handed me. And depersonalization is a real thing that happens to real providers, and I wanted it to fit. It doesn't spread through a county though. Burnout doesn't run in herds. I asked hypothetically, what dampens a startle reflex in an otherwise healthy adult? Beta blockers, SSRIs, some neurological conditions. Did I want a referral? I take nothing. I took the referral. The neurologist can see me in September. September. And yes, I thought about leaving. Here's the math. Since every person in a story like this has a reason they stayed, and mine has a monthly payment, the practice might fetch 80 grand from nobody, because there is no nobody. No graduate has been willing to move to this county in a decade. I've watched the recruiting emails go out and die. Defaulting on the loans takes my license with it eventually, and then the farms from here to the state line have no one within 100 miles for a prolapsed uterus at 2 a.m. And there's my dad, who I was still telling myself needed me close by. So no, I stayed. People mostly do. I understand the cattle better now, is one way to put it. June 2nd was the bull. The rocking sea keeps a herd sire, 1,900 pounds of him, and he went down in their alley chute with his hind legs free, which is one of the more dangerous arrangements this job offers. The kill zone on a downed bull is anywhere a hoof can reach, and hoofs reach farther than people believe, and I have scars in the catalog to prove it. I worked inside that range for 40 minutes, IV line, dexamethasone, ropes rigged to roll him off his bad hip, my knees in the mud next to legs that could take my head off my shoulders on a reflex he wouldn't even mean. Somewhere in minute 30, I looked at my watch. 61. 61. I have a number for this exact work from 2 years ago. A downer cow in a field, nothing like this bad, and that day the watch said 118 and climbing. I finished, got him up, watched him walk off like nothing happened, packed my kit, and then sat in the truck with my hands on the wheel for a while. Not driving, doing arithmetic I didn't like. That night, I ran my dad's clap test on the only downer animal left on my list. I rigged the phone speaker on the shelf behind my bed and set an app to fire a klaxon at a random time. There's an app for it, of course there is. It's marketed to deep sleepers. 11:52 p.m. Full volume, 18 inches from my skull. I registered it, and that was all. A loud sound, source known, off switch located. My chest did nothing at all. No drop, no spike, no cold flush. The ears hurt fine, nothing swiveled. And when the ears don't move, you stop kneeling next to whatever that is. Except I didn't have anywhere to stop kneeling. I ran the same test 4 more nights, louder, at worse hours. You can guess how those went, or I can just tell you. 58, 55, 61, 57. Dinner at Dad's on the 8th. I did something I'd been planning for 3 days, which tells you what my hypotheses had come down to. While he stood at the stove with his back to me, I took the cast iron skillet off the counter and dropped it flat on the tile from waist height. In that kitchen, it sounded like a car wreck. A man of 71 should come out of his skin. He turned around the way you turn when someone says your name, looked at the pan, looked at me, and what came over his face wasn't anger. And it wasn't right. It was relief. The specific relief of a man who realizes he isn't going to have to be the one to say it first. I asked him, how long? He picked up the skillet, set it back on the stove, and said, why do you think I retired? That's the whole answer. That's everything he has ever given me on it. I have asked 5 different ways since, sober and otherwise, and he talks about the ball game or the roast or my truck's timing. But the transfer paperwork was signed the next morning. Both copies dated, witnessed by the neighbor, sitting square in the middle of my clinic desk when I came in. He never mentioned it. If you want the exact moment this stopped being a veterinary problem for me, it's that stack of paper. 2 winters ago, before he retired, my dad ran this same county. I keep starting that sentence and not finishing it. Fine, moving on. June 14th, Wade Hollis broke his hip coming off his own porch steps because 79 is 79 no matter what's in your timber. His grandnephew took over the place with the confidence of a man who has watched several videos. On 11 p.m. on the 16th, the kid called me. A heifer's calf had gotten hung up in the old page wire at the north fence. Could I come? He was 2 hours away at the hospital with Wade. He could hear it bawling on the barn camera. I'll be honest about what that sound did to me when he played it over the phone. In my body, nothing. In my head, something set up. It took me a second to name it. It had been weeks since I'd heard any animal in this county complain about anything. I knew Wade's rule. Heard on the fence past dark, you stay in. I drove out anyway, and I need to be exact here about the difference between brave and unafraid, because I used to know it from the inside, and now I only remember it like a phone number. Brave is doing it while the alarm is going off. There was no alarm. There hasn't been an alarm in a while. From my notes, written in the truck after, I'm not cleaning them up. 11:38 p.m. Parked at the north gate. Hurt is on the fence at the timber side. Same configuration as March 30th. 60 hit standing. Calf audible from northeast corner. Gus stays in the truck. He doesn't argue about it, which he would have before. I climbed through the wire and walked into the herd. 60 animals in full dark. I moved between their bodies with the heat coming off them on both sides of me, hides brushing my shoulders, and not one animal shifted her feet. Warm, alive, unmoving, like wading through a church. The loudest thing in the pasture was my own boots in the grass. Halfway to the corner, I finally put my finger on what was missing besides the fear, and it was sound. A herd at night is a machine of small noises, gut rumble, cut, tail swat, and breath through those big wet nostrils. Some cow somewhere with an opinion. All of it, gone. There was breath, but the breath was together, in and out together. 60 animals on one clock, and I was inside the tempo, hearing it from all sides of me at once. The clock wasn't theirs. Out past the wire in the timber, something was breathing on it too. The same rhythm, at a size that was wrong. I've put my ear against enough chest walls to know what volume of animal makes what volume of breath. And I stopped doing that math when the answer came back wrong, and I'm not going to write my guess here because a guess is all it is. I got to the calf, 60 pounds of him wedged shoulder deep in page wire, and he was bawling and fighting the fence. And it's an ugly thing to say, but he was the best thing I'd been near in a month because he was the only animal in the county behaving correctly. I got my hands on him and started working the wire. And while my hands were busy, I counted fence posts down the line toward the corner because that's a stockman's tick. You count posts. My dad does it out loud from the truck. 11 posts between me and the corner. Wade's fences run a post every 16 feet, and I've walked that line in daylight. There should be 10. I counted again while the wire came off the calf's shoulder. 10, then 11. It depended on nothing I could isolate. No blink, no hit turn. The count changed the way a word changes when you say it too many times. And the 11th post, third from the corner, was moving. barely and evenly in and out on the clock. The calf came free into my arms and screamed once against my coat and then stopped, mid-sound. Not a taper or a calming, a stop, the same shape as Gus's bark cutting out in April. I felt it go through his ribs, a tension letting go all at once. Every strut in that little body standing down together, and the closest thing I can compare it to is heat leaving, the way a body on my table goes from patient to wait. He hung in my arms, breathing slow and even, and turned his head and looked at the timber. I wish I could say I ran. I didn't. I stood in the middle of 60 silent cattle in the dark, holding a calf that had just gone quiet in a way I have no medicine for. And I looked at the post that wasn't a post, because nothing in my body raised any objection to looking at it. That's the horror. If this is horror, I got to look at it as long as I wanted. I couldn't really make out its shape. It was a fence post. Then it was a wrongness, the general height of a fence post. And past a certain point, my eyes handed it back to me unprocessed, the way the lab handed back that flat line. When I was done looking, I set the calf down by his mother, walked out of the herd at exactly the speed I'd walked in, got in the truck, and drove home. Gus was sitting up in the passenger seat, head turned to the timber, and he didn't make a sound the whole way. That was 3 weeks ago. That's where it all sits now. Milk yields at both dairies are up. Weight gains on the spring calves are ahead of every projection, and that part isn't even mysterious. Calm animals convert feed better. It's textbook. The farmers are quietly pleased. Nobody is reporting anything to anybody, because what's the complaint? Doctor, my animals are thriving and nothing frightens them. The county fair is in August, and I'll expect we'll take ribbons. I keep a laminated card clipped to my visor now. Things that should scare me, and then a list. Inside kick range, hind legs on a downed bull, Route 12 in fog, the timber after dark. I read it out loud in the truck like a pre-flight, because the alarm doesn't fire on its own anymore, so I run the checklist manually. My phone goes off 3 times a day with an alarm I labeled Feel Something. Before I posted this, I ran one more test, because I am, whatever else happened, still a person who runs the test. I read this whole write-up out loud, alone in my kitchen, wearing the watch. 54 flat, the entire way through. No spike at the mare, none at the stakeout, none at the post. And I wrote it. So here's what I'm asking. I can't grade this anymore. I've read it back twice, and I genuinely cannot tell whether it's frightening or whether it's a long, boring story about cows, because the meter I would use to check is the part of me that's gone. If it scared you, comment. Tell me where. Tell me the paragraph. Tell me what your body did. The actual physical thing. Jolt, chill, check the window, whatever you've got. Be specific. I'll believe your instruments over mine, since mine are down. And sorry for the length. I tried to cut it and couldn't tell what was safe to lose. One more thing, and then I'll post this. Last night, I woke up at 3:04 a.m., standing at my bedroom window, no memory of getting up. That window looks out on the back pasture and the timber past it, and Gus was standing beside me with his tail flat. The two of us lined up at the glass like a couple of fence posts, aimed at the tree line, and I don't know how long we'd been standing there. I wasn't afraid exactly. I looked out at the timber for a while, and some of it looked back, for all I know. And then I went to bed.